Let me share a story that happened to me. I've been happily married for 40 years. I'm 64, and my wife is 62. Our relationship is more than ordinary, it's truly unique. We're not just financially stable and healthy, but also proud parents of 2 great daughters who gave us 3 amazing grandchildren. Our journey together goes beyond simple companionship. We're deeply connected. Reflecting on it, I realized we're not just best friends, but true halves. Even younger couples would envy our close bond. So, you're probably wondering what could go wrong in such an ideal scenario? One Saturday stands out vividly. The sun was shining, making the day full of joyful anticipation. I was excited about a golf game with my friends, the highlight of my week, breaking the monotony of everyday life to enjoy quality time on the golf course. With enthusiasm, I said goodbye to our house, walked with my golf clubs ready, smiling broadly, completely unaware of the unexpected turn of events ahead. I was looking forward to the day, not knowing a fateful incident was about to happen. As I impatiently approached the golf course, a sudden realization struck me. I forgot my reliable golf club repair tool, a must-have for any golf lover. My friends expected me to bring it, but in the rush of leaving home, I completely forgot. Frustrated, I decided to correct my mistake and quickly turned around, driving back home. After parking the car and getting out, I noticed Victor at the front door, ready to help in any situation. It's amazing how such a young man can be reliable and self-confident. We're sincerely grateful to have him in our lives. While I've turned to him for help before, his presence today was unexpected since he was already here yesterday. This made me wonder if his wife had asked for something unknown to me, or if she invited him without informing me. Curious, I cautiously stepped into the house, not expecting anything unusual. To my horror, I saw my wife in the living room in her undergarments, alongside Victor. When I entered, I was surprised to see my partially dressed wife and Victor, shirtless, coming out of the guest bathroom. Their astonished faces showed they were caught off guard by my sudden appearance. Although there were no obvious signs of a compromising situation, their reaction and the palpable smell of closeness in the air left no doubt that I barely managed to avoid being caught red-handed in an unexpected situation. I found myself at home in a delicate situation. My wife asked about the reason for my early arrival, but I chose to ignore her and directly addressed Victor. It was an unprecedented occasion, since I always considered him a well-mannered young man. He hesitantly tried to explain his presence, and my wife immediately intervened. Raising her voice in his defense, she explained that she had called him to service the pool. To my surprise, I replied that I doubted the need to clean the pool, as it had been taken care of only the day before. I saw her trying hard to regain control of the situation, but it didn't work out as she hoped. She quickly realized her earlier statement sounded silly and tried to save the situation by blaming the pool not being cleaned before. On the other hand, Victor looked completely shocked, as if he had seen a ghost. I pointed at Victor and firmly stated that I was aware of his actions. Even though my suspicions were based on limited facts, if I found him in my house again, I wouldn't hesitate to take extreme measures. Hurriedly leaving, he didn't forget to put on his shirt and quickly disappeared into his car. Despite my wife's pleas to stop accusing her, she insisted I was being unreasonable and had some kind of mental disorder. It's crucial to note that our marriage, as I mentioned earlier, has always been strong. I trusted her completely, and until this incident, I had no reason to doubt her. Decency. I could feel it in the air. There was a palpable awkwardness in their body language. My intuition told me I stumbled upon something, and her defensive reaction only confirmed my suspicions. It reached a point where she threatened to involve our children and grandson, trying to shift the blame on herself. Curiosity made me find out why she chose such an outfit, because she usually prefers more modest outfits for sunbathing. The bra and underwear she wore for sunbathing were not what I expected. They were transparent, which surprised me. When she explained she was going to sunbathe and swim, it was hard for me to believe it, considering the cool weather. In all these years, I have never seen her swim in such conditions. Something was off, and I felt like she wasn't being completely honest. Despite her attempts to make me doubt myself through intimidation methods, I remained confident in my intuition and firm in my beliefs. I thought about the length of this novel. Considering he is only 19 years old, and we have known about him for 3 years, This made me doubt that she was manipulating and deceiving me for much longer than I had initially assumed. Our differences quickly escalated into a sharp quarrel, which happens between us very rarely. Despite my accusations, she stubbornly denied all her actions. At this time, friends called and asked about my lateness. I considered going to a psychologist, but in the end, I decided to go. I hope this will give me the opportunity to calm down and gain clarity of mind. While playing golf, memories from the past kept popping up, making me wonder if she was unfaithful and if she manipulated me by using means of manipulation. It gradually became clear to me that I hadn't noticed this throughout our marriage. If I hadn't identified them in that delicate situation, I would most likely have continued to accept her explanations without question. It suddenly dawned on me that I had been harboring this suspicion for a long time. But deep love for her and naivety did not allow me to admit it. I have never delved into these uncertainties, but there was one distinct memory that always remained in the shadows. Despite the passage of time, I decided to return to it, refraining from trying to classify these memories as suppressed. On the contrary, I began to look at them anew from the point of view of a mature and knowledgeable person, far from the young and inexperienced 20-year-old boy that I once was. We lived together before marriage during my 2-year college studies. I had my first experience of a real romantic relationship after the period of military operations had passed. As a late teenager in this field, I perceived our connection as something unique. But looking back, I realized that there were obvious signs that I didn't notice at the time. In the process of deepening into reflection, the pieces of the puzzle began to connect. These memories surfaced in connection with recent events, evoking meetings in which, as I now suspect, at least 3 different men with whom she was in close relationship at that time took part. Among them was my former best friend, with whom I gradually grew distant. It's been over 2 decades since we last saw each other, because he now lives in another country. These thoughts persistently trouble my mind, refusing to fade away. The weight of these memories builds up in me, not allowing me to cope. They keep me awake at night, robbing me of much-needed sleep. Suffocating anxiety takes over my entire mind. When my wife predictably denied my accusations of having an improper relationship with our grandson's friend, she manipulated our innocent children into this situation, concealing the most crucial details. Keeping the truth hidden, she intentionally didn't mention the image etched in my memory. She was in a tempting bikini next to our grandson's friend, shirtless, while slyly talking about innocently caring for the pool in our backyard. Perhaps she had deceived me countless times before, easily escaping my notice. But this instance was an undeniable revelation, an indisputable betrayal that pierced my heart like a dagger. I found myself in a situation where she tried to portray me as behaving oddly in her later years. Even more distressing was my inability to convey to my children and grandson that intuition told me something was wrong. They just didn't want to believe that she was alone in the living room, dressed provocatively, and he was in boxer shorts without a tank top. The entire scenario turned into a verbal clash, and she manipulated the situation, creating the impression that she was right. The following weeks were spent in the toughest struggle, resulting in a significant weight loss despite my thinness. My mental state deteriorated rapidly, and I increasingly feared I might damage myself. Additionally, she successfully turned all my children against me, painting me as a scoundrel in their eyes. Unlike her, I'm not naturally assertive and don't know how to engage in active disputes. I'm one of those people who prefer to avoid conflicts and resolve them privately. But this situation became a turning point for me. I began to doubt myself, leading me to seek solace in individual consultations. It was during this time that I realized my marriage seemed to have been built on a false foundation. My therapist introduced me to the principle of mindfulness, but I struggled to grasp its essence. Despite all my efforts, I couldn't master the art of being present in the moment. Weeks passed, and I increasingly avoided discussing my spouse's infidelity. But then came the turning point when I could no longer suppress my emotions. Summoning the courage, I finally began talking about the betrayal that occurred in her younger years. The shock on her face was indescribable. Initially, she categorically denied her guilt and dismissed my accusations as nonsense. She seemed determined to find someone to blame for her own insecurities. Despite my disappointment, I remained calm, and reiterated that none of her words were entirely true. Nevertheless, she continued desperately searching for a scapegoat, clutching at straws to confirm her unfounded suspicions. It was disheartening to witness the trust in our relationship being shattered because her accusations only widened the gap between us. I couldn't stay calm any longer. I reached my breaking point. It was a breakdown like none I've had before. I crumpled to the floor, overwhelmed by uncontrollable tears. Even simple breathing felt like a daunting task, not to mention speaking. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, but this incident caught her off guard. Truly surprised, she knelt down and hugged me tightly, comforting me as I gradually recovered. She denied any wrongdoing and assured me of her willingness to address our issues. She mentioned not understanding my state of mind and feared I might leave her for unjustifiable reasons. Yet, I still lacked concrete evidence because she didn't admit to anything. Gradually, we delved into the unfolding events, discovering the discrepancies in our memories, especially regarding crucial moments like time and events. The fact that our recollections differed surprised me, given the over a decade we had spent living together. Although my memories felt remarkably fresh, as if only from last week, she mainly remained silent, listening attentively. It seemed she was taken aback by the volume of my memories, realizing that I wasn't as distrustful as she might have assumed. A part of me suspected that she was attempting to gauge my knowledge to assess the potential impact of her own confession. The closest she came to confessing was when she suggested a meeting with my psychologist if I found it helpful. While recounting her wrongdoings, she cautiously admitted that disclosing everything might alter my perception of her. This brought to mind Jack Nicholson's witty line from A Few Good Men: "You want the truth, but you can't handle it." I found myself consumed by curiosity, pondering whether the truth could surpass the torment my imagination had conjured, thereby intensifying my current suffering. Moreover, I started contemplating how she involved my children in this intricate web. I strongly believed she harbored a deep sense of shame. After 4 decades together, I felt I knew her inside out. To prove to our children I wasn't crazy and she was mistaken, I decided to secretly record our conversations. I was determined to gather evidence of her infidelity. One morning, I had the idea to reach out to my former best friend, suspected of cheating on his wife, whom we haven't seen in over 2 decades. In a desperate attempt to get him to confess to cheating with my wife, I decided to secretly record our conversation. Until that moment, the thought of such a call hadn't occurred to me. After obtaining his number from a mutual friend, I dialed it. With a pounding heart and trembling hands, I connected with a voice that seemed both familiar and sleepy because of the late hour in his part of the world. I said his name, mustering the courage to tell him the purpose of my call. Trying my best to keep an even voice, I grappled with the weight of the passing years, mentioning how it had been a while. There was a moment of silence, and I almost felt a thought flash through his head, replaying the steps of our past friendship. He replied, his tone wary, asking who I was. Summoning my strength, I took a deep breath and said I was David. His voice held a hint of disbelief as he echoed my name, asking if it was really me. I confirmed, and our conversation quickly shifted to another topic. We exchanged forced pleasantries, attempting to squeeze 2 decades of life into a few minutes, but the pain of lost time lingered. Despite the gravity of my call, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Gathering my remaining courage, I posed a question. I asked if he remembered Anna. A pause followed, and even through the phone I sensed his concern. He hesitantly answered, confirming he remembered her. With a heavy heart, I weakly stated, choked with emotion, that she was my wife. After standing in silence for a moment to let the weight of my words sink in, I continued, informing him that Anna passed away last night. Silence enveloped us, seemingly stretching for an eternity. Realizing he must have been caught off guard, his thoughts raced. Trying to make sense of the news, I took a deep breath, attempting to convey emotions before her passing away. I said, "She trusted me." I mentioned her confession about his infidelity and revealed the betrayal, the lies, the lost years. There was a sharp intake of breath and a heavy sigh at the other end of the line. Cutting him off, I stated that I was choking, and my voice was filled with a mix of resentment and betrayal. How could he do this to me? He was my closest friend. On the other end, his sobs and choked voice intertwined. He admitted, with grief evident in every word, that he couldn't even express how deeply sorry he was. It was a terrible mistake that haunted him every day, and he regretted it with all his inner strength. Despite feeling the weight of his remorse, my heart still bore a powerful mix of anger and pain. When he made his confession, I couldn't help but continue recording our conversation, knowing it was the only way to force my wife to finally admit the truth. As he sobbed uncontrollably, the burden of his guilt over more than 20 years finally revealed itself. He pleaded for forgiveness, expressing his deep regret for letting me down in the most terrible way. When his confession lingered in the air for a moment, I felt a deep sense of loss. Our once strong friendship, built on trust and camaraderie, had collapsed beyond recognition. With a heavy heart, I uttered the last words, saying goodbye to John. After ending the conversation, a mix of emotions overwhelmed me. Although my heart remained heavy, I found comfort in having the indisputable proof I needed. Yet, the pain of betrayal still gnawed at my heart. When my wife returned, I mustered the courage and played the recording for her. As she listened, a deep shadow of embarrassment crossed her face. She could no longer deny the truth. She was ensnared in a web of deception. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded with me not to share the recording with our children. To secure her confession about the other two alleged affairs, we struck a deal. Recognizing the need for proof, I meticulously documented every detail of her admission. After the heart-wrenching confession, she implored me to promise not to share the recording. Feeling the need for space and reflection, I suggested we separate, giving each of us time to reassess our lives. It was time to reflect on the state of our decades-long marriage. Having spent over 4 decades together, I, a 64-year-old, and she, a 62-year-old, believed we had a strong and dependable connection. But everything changed when I discovered her connection with our grandson's friend. Troubling memories surfaced, casting doubt on her loyalty throughout our relationship. Despite the evidence, she vehemently denied any involvement with our grandson's friend. Instead, she attempted to blame me for our impending breakup, preserving her innocence. Surprisingly, during our conversation, I agreed, knowing it would devastate her. She suggested an amicable divorce, where I'd shoulder the blame for ending our marriage, citing my suspicions rather than her infidelity. Unbeknownst to her, I recorded every admission she made. The next day, my children approached me, urging reconciliation with their mother. It was then that I decided to reveal the recording, presenting irrefutable evidence. Consequently, they began to see her in a different light, realizing the extent of her betrayal. Angry at my decision not to fulfill the terms of our agreement, my wife waged war, intending to claim everything in the event of a divorce. However, she fails to understand that at my age, material possessions matter little, as long as I have enough to sustain myself. Until the age of 90, when many family members typically pass away, my focus is on something else. The love and support of my children are genuinely important, along with the legacy I'll leave behind. Despite pressure from those advocating for the preservation of our 4-decade relationship, they seem to forget that with age comes the desire to spend remaining years with someone who truly loves you. Whenever I look at her, all I see is deception, manipulation, betrayal, and lies. I've reached a point where living a life built on lies has become unbearable. After 3 long months, we divorced. Anna moved in with her daughter, and I sold the house, dividing the money before embarking on world travels. The children informed me of Anna's suffering from shame, her descent into deep depression, and a subsequent stroke that left her paralyzed. I experienced a moment of anger before resuming the call and inquiring with Amy, my sister-in-law, about her invitation to that man to meet us at the hospice. Amy confirmed that she had indeed invited him, though she had initially tried to dissuade Elaine. She wasn't sure about Elaine's reasons for wanting him there. I expressed surprise that Susie might also be present, but Amy clarified that Elaine had mentioned the 3-year-old was too young to hear their discussion. I decided to drop Susie off at her parents' place before heading to the hospice, and Amy and I made our way to the hospice together. Upon our arrival, Amy and I received a warm welcome from the nurse, Cindy, who informed us that Elaine was having a good day and had used the morphine pump less frequently. We then proceeded to Elaine's room, and Amy assured me that everything would be okay. The room had a peaceful atmosphere with a garden view, but my discomfort increased when I noticed Trevor sitting by the headboard. I greeted Elaine by shaking her hand instead of with a kiss, and sat down with Amy on the opposite side of the bed from Trevor. Elaine began by expressing her gratitude for our presence, acknowledging the awkwardness of the situation, but emphasizing that they all wanted what was best for our daughter, Susie. I reiterated that Susie was my top priority, directing my gaze at Trevor and questioning his presence. Elaine, however, delayed her explanation, initially thanking both Amy and me for our support and describing Amy as an exceptional big sister. She also revealed her struggle with infertility and her gratitude for Amy's support through the infertility testing and in vitro fertilization process. Elaine praised Amy as her hero and a wonderful aunt to Susie. She expressed her confidence that Amy would continue to love and care for Susie and help me raise her. Then, Elaine broached the more complicated matter, acknowledging the pain her relationship with Trevor had caused me. I expressed my irritation and questioned her reasons for cheating on me with him. Elaine attributed her actions to the desperation she felt during their struggles with conception, despite Amy's assurance that my participation count was fine. I didn't quite believe her, and I glanced at Amy, who simply shrugged. Elaine explained that she had been desperate and ready to try anything. Trevor worked in the office next door, and one day during lunch, he saw her crying. She looked at Trevor with a smile and continued that Trevor had been kind and comforting, holding her hand while she cried, and over the next few months, they became close friends. I snorted and rolled my eyes, expressing my disbelief. I commented that I understood she might have been desperate and willing to try anything. Elaine added that Trevor had volunteered to assist, to which I responded with a disdainful look and suggested that he should have stayed clear. Elaine then detailed her reasons for her actions, explaining that, initially, her motive was to improve her chances of getting pregnant. However, over time, she and Trevor had fallen in love. She described it as an incredible experience and expressed her desire to find a way to keep both me and Trevor in her life. I questioned why she would think I'd ever agree to such a situation, and Elaine admitted she had been afraid I would divorce her when I found out about her affair. Instead, she described how I had become her hero for supporting her throughout the entire IVF process. She acknowledged that, despite having considered divorce, I had prioritized our child and decided to stay. She believed this demonstrated that I still loved her enough to ask one last favor. She then asked that I allow Trevor to be part of Susie's life and grant him joint custody after she was gone. I looked at Trevor, who appeared concerned and unlike his usual self. I was taken aback by Elaine's request and exchanged surprised glances with Amy. Finally, I firmly refused, stating there was no way I would agree to giving Trevor joint custody. Elaine, after looking at me in amazement and shedding some tears, composed herself and conceded that she had hoped for a more understanding response, but had no choice, so she insisted I had to give Trevor joint custody. Elaine revealed that Susie was not my biological child. In response to my questioning, she explained that she had wanted a child with each of us, and she had convinced Amy to use Trevor's analysis for IVF. She had planned to use my analysis for a second IVF in the future. However, due to her cancer diagnosis, that plan was no longer possible. Turning to Amy, I raised my eyebrows, and she confirmed that she had used Trevor's IVF sample at Elaine's request. She expressed confidence that a DNA test would confirm her parental rights to Susie. Trevor was smirking, but Amy quickly clarified that a DNA test wouldn't help him at all. She explained that Elaine had tried to persuade her to use Trevor's IVF sample, but she had refused and discarded it as medical waste. My genetic material was the only one used in our IVF. Elaine became upset and yelled at Amy, asking why she had done this. Amy defended her decision, emphasizing that what Elaine had asked her to do was not only selfish, but morally wrong. She revealed that Elaine's comment about being a genetic dead end was untrue. Elaine realized her mistake and asked for forgiveness. Amy explained that the eggs that combined with my analysis were hers, making her Susie's biological mother. She also mentioned that after Elaine was gone, we would get married, and she would legally adopt her own daughter. I responded firmly to Elaine, making it clear that I had no intention of willingly sharing her or my daughter with Trevor. I questioned Elaine about why she hadn't pursued a divorce and had gone through IVF with me. I expressed my anger, telling her that when Amy revealed her request to switch my materials with Trevor's, I had been close to kicking her out of the house. I also mentioned that Amy and I had fantasized about taking revenge on both Elaine and Trevor, but had ultimately decided on a more suitable response to their betrayal. We had considered the possibility of using Elaine as a surrogate mother, but various factors, including cancer, had made that plan unfeasible. Elaine asked about her eggs, and Amy informed her that they were stored in the clinic's freezer, anonymously labeled. Amy explained that they might be used by one of her patients in need of an egg donor in the future, but Trevor wouldn't have any involvement with the baby. Despite the circumstances, Amy and I expressed our love for Elaine and offered her a chance to make amends before her passing. We emphasized the importance of making her remaining days special for Susie, who would face a challenging time after her mother's pass away. We mentioned the story we would tell Susie about her birth, giving Elaine a choice between being portrayed as the deceitful woman who betrayed me or as the brave sister who helped us fulfill our dream of having a child. We asked Elaine if she wanted to be a hero for Susie, at least for once.